This year, this is my year, our year. Can you feel it? More motivation. 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 Synergy. 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 Adventure. 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 Responsibility. 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 Intimacy. 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 Achievement. 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 Advancement. 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 Determination. 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 Focus. Focus. This is my year.
Honey, so? What do you think?
Yeah.
Motivation, integrity, determination, synergy. Come on, honey. You're not even listening to me. I mean, I have a poster and everything this time. This is perfect. I mean business. Jack?
This is my year. I promise.
Stephanie grew up in a little town on the west coast of Florida called Fort Myers, also known as God's Waiting Room. And when we were living up north, we would visit Stephanie's parents in Fort Myers as much as we felt welcome because we were trying to escape those cold Ohio winters. And so we spent a lot of time in Fort Myers with Stephanie's parents. And consequently, our whole family has some really great memories that were forged in Fort Myers with Stephanie's parents. And about 6 years ago, Stephanie's dad passed and her mom moved up here. So it's been a while since our whole family has been back to Fort Myers together. So a week ago, last Sunday, we were leaving my sister's house in Fort Lauderdale, and we decided to detour through Fort Myers and visit some of our favorite spots and relive some of our favorite memories in Fort Myers. Everything was going great until we're on Sanibel Island, which if you've been there has a little bit of traffic. And the engine dies on the Suburban, and it just sort of coasts to a stop on the side of the road. Now, I know the relationship that some of y'all have with your cars is different. Some of y'all treat your cars like they're just pieces of machinery. Our family doesn't understand that. We adopt our cars as part of the family. My Camry has 280,000 miles on it. Our Suburban is nearing its 20th birthday, and we've been driving that thing for more than 340,000 miles. So, yes, thank you. Someone with, yeah, okay. Yeah, so suffice it to say, this is not the first time that we've coasted to a stop on the side of the road. My family's kind of used to the drill. They get out of the car, they look for the nearest 7-Eleven, they all go to buy Slurpees, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with the car. And so we decide, you just have to talk nice to it and just be gentle and reassure her that she's still got the prime spot in the family household. And then we're back on the road. So 10 minutes later, it's running great. All we had to do was just talk nice. And we're back on the road, and everything's great. And then, again, same thing. And so now Peyton and I decide, okay, it's probably that there's an oxygen sensor that's been bugging us for a little while. And really, what is an oxygen sensor? I mean, it's just like the appendix of a car, right? You don't really need it, just rip it out. So we watch a YouTube video for 2 minutes. We're like, we can do this. We climb underneath the car on the side of the road. We rip out all 4 oxygen sensors. That's done. Who needs those? Car starts up, runs great. We're heading down the road. Peyton and I are high-fiving each other. We feel like we've earned the title master mechanic at this point. And so we're all full of victory and heading down the road for exactly 12 minutes. And then we're parked on the side of the road. And we let it rest for a little while, and then she seems to be good to go again. So over the next couple hours, we learned that the exact proper ratio was 12 minutes of driving and then 12 minutes of rest. And 12 minutes of driving and 12 minutes of rest. Yeah. How was your Christmas break? So we made it home, but I have to say that as I was thinking about our time together over the next couple of weeks, I thought, a lot of us, as we celebrate a new year, we look back on the old year, we look back, from this milestone point, and sometimes we feel like the progress we're making is a little bit like the progress that the Barretts made on the way home from Fort Myers. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And sometimes we even wonder, am I making progress at all? And one of the most difficult things, I think, in life is to reach these milestone moments. You know, a big birthday or an anniversary, the end of a year, the end of a decade, and to look back and to begin wondering, am I making a difference? Is my life having any impact? Am I making any progress? Maybe as you look back, you're frustrated because you feel like you'd be further along the road by now. Maybe you realize that, you know, your scoreboard doesn't say what you thought it would say at this point, and you're running out of innings. And you start to think, man, I thought by this point I'd have the corner office. I thought by this point my relationship would have been further progressed. I thought by this point we would have gotten out of debt. I thought by this point we would be further along. And sometimes it feels like I'm just not making a little bit of progress, like it's a little bit forward and then it's a little bit back. And I just want to tell you this morning that you are here on purpose, that your life was designed with purpose and for a purpose. We say here at Access Church that we exist to help you make friends, grow in faith, and live with purpose. And we say that because we believe that God has designed you on purpose and for a purpose. Your life is not an accident. I don't know how much of my scarred childhood I've shared with you, but some of you might remember I have 3 older sisters. Just let that hang for a minute. 3 older sisters. I'm the youngest, and my sisters used to torment me in a lot of ways, but one way they tormented me when I was a kid was constantly telling me that I was an accident. Now, kids, when you go to lunch today, you can ask your parents what that means. But they would tell me that I was an accident. And one time we're all together, our family, and one of my sisters says, Mom, isn't it true Rich was an accident? And my mother, who had to get married in 1956, kids, you can ask your parents about that one too. My mom said, oh, honey, you were all accidents. So if that's the kind of love and nurturing home that you grew up in, you know, where your parents just really gave you that kind of support, I want you to know today, you are not an accident. I believe that God has designed you. Jesus believed and Jesus taught that God designed you with purpose, that God designed you with greatness, that you are here for a reason, that God knows exactly where you are in life, and He has great plans for your future. And sometimes we feel that way. Sometimes we feel like there's greatness ahead. Sometimes we feel like there's great stuff coming. But then other times we just feel like, I don't know, don't feel like I'm making much progress. And we get discouraged. And I get it because there's a lot of reasons to be discouraged. There's a lot of things that come along and create obstacles for us, obstacles to our success, obstacles to our achievement, obstacles to our progress, and we just start to feel discouraged. In fact, Jesus taught that there's actually a being, a spirit that seeks to discourage you, the father of lies. And that may be a hard thing for you to embrace. Maybe it's a hard thing for you to believe that there is a spiritual world and a spiritual dynamic, but you know that there's discouragement waiting to trip you up. Right? You know, you see it in just the story of life. You see time slipping away, and these milestones like a new decade are just another reminder to you that you're not making the kind of progress that you thought you would be making. You have started to come to the uncomfortable realization that it is going to take you 11 hours to drive home from Fort Myers, Florida. And you just realize, like, I'm not where I thought I would be, and this is going a lot slower than I thought it would take, and it's hard, and I'm discouraged. And so some of us, we respond to that by just saying, you know what, please don't let this be another message about goals. 2020 goals. I don't want to think about 2020 goals. My 2020 goal is to actually accomplish my 2019 goal. And the truth is, I set that one in 2018 because I had decided in 2017 that I was never again going to have another year like 2016. Right? And you're like, just let me try to make a little bit of progress. I don't want another message on goals. I'm not really a goals person. I'm just not very good at goals. And so some of us, because we don't want to disappoint ourselves, we don't want to be disappointed by our lack of progress, some of us just decide we're not going to set goals at all. I don't do that. I don't do goals. I don't do resolutions. I'm just going to, maybe you've just said my goal is just like the same. just not get fatter, right? None of this, like you gave up a long time ago on getting in shape and working out and all that, and now you just decided, just maintain would be a good goal. Or maybe you go the other direction. Maybe your response to a bad 19 or a bad decade is to go the other way and overcompensate. And you say, I'm gonna knock it out of the park in 2020. I'm gonna go big. I am never going to eat another carb again. I'm gonna go to the gym every single day. Right? Anybody here that's kind of your modus operandi? Like you're like, I am just gonna go big. I'm gonna blow everybody away. And then you get to January 5th and you go to the gym and there's no parking spots. And you're like, it must be a sign. And you go home and you just eat all the Christmas cookies and you decide, yep, just gonna go for holding the same. Look, it's hard when we reach these milestones because they cause us to do a little bit of reflection. They cause us to do a little bit of looking back. And sometimes when we reflect and sometimes when we look back, it's a little bit discouraging because we feel like I am not making the progress that I thought I was going to be making. Matter of fact, you might feel like your life is just like this one big notification that popped up here on my phone and it says, Fitness Pal, seems like these reminders aren't helpful. We're going to turn them off. And you're just like, that's it. I'm done. Just don't even remind me about all of the great goals I had, all of the great plans I had, everything that's ahead. But I want to tell you this morning that God has great plans for you. Do you believe that? That's a hard thing to believe, right? If we're honest. To really think that first of all, that God knows me and that God sees me, that God has great plans for you. But I believe that it's absolutely true. And I want to ask the question, what would be different about your life? What would be different about your relationships? What would be different about your decisions? What would be different about your career? What would be different about the environments that you found yourself in this next year if you absolutely, truly believe that God sees you, that God cares for you, that God is for you, and God has great plans for you in 2020, plans that are bigger than you even have for yourself. What if you really believe that? What if you believed that God wanted great things for you? Because here's the reality. I believe you were designed to be great. God didn't design you to be average. God didn't design you to be normal. God knew exactly the context that you would find yourself in today. On January 5th, 2020, God knew that you would be here, that you would be in these relationships that you're in right now. And He designed those relationships to be great. He designed your marriage to be great. He designed you to be a great husband. He designed you to be a great wife. He designed you to be a great mother. He designed you to be a great father. He designed you to be a great kid. He designed you to be a fantastic grandfather or grandmother. He designed you to be a great friend. He designed you to be a great employee. He designed you to be a great boss. He has designed you to be great. He has great things in store for you. And I believe that 2020 can be your best year yet. And so the question that we have to ask is, what does God mean when God says something is great? What does Jesus mean when Jesus says that something is great? And the good news for us this morning is that we have some clue to this. We have some insight to this. Because one time when Jesus was teaching, someone actually came to Jesus and they asked him what he thought was the definition of great. Now, it was someone who's trying to trick Jesus. It was one of the Pharisees who was coming to Jesus and trying to lead Jesus into a trap. It's the same thing that happens today. You know, somebody asks a question and they don't really hope that you give a great answer. They're just hoping to kind of trip you up. Maybe say something that is going to cause the people that are following you to get disenchanted with you or to get offended by you and to stop following you. And this was the goal of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because when Jesus came along, they were the rule keepers. They kept everything kind of neat and in its place and where it belonged. And they had a system that had been in place for hundreds of years, and they had hundreds of rules. And then Jesus came along and he started to kind of turn things on their head a little bit. And he started to ask questions that most rabbis had never asked, and he started to teach things that these folks had never heard taught before. And Jesus began to teach about what's in our heart and what's inside of us that matters more than our behavior and the externals or the things that we know, but our pursuit of a relationship with God. And so this really kind of turned things on their head a little bit. And so they were trying to trip Jesus up. And so one of the Pharisees, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. And they said, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" What's the great commandment? Singular. What's the one thing that we should be pursuing? What's the one thing that we should be focused on? I think if Jesus has an answer to this is something that we should know, something that we should pay attention to, because pursuing the one thing, and which, by the way, when we hear the word commandment, we think immediately of what? 10 Commandments, right? That's like when you hear the word commandment, it's not used very often in our language today. We go to the 10 Commandments. And when we think of commandments, we think of rules. And when you and I think of rules, we think of rules that were designed to keep us from having any fun, right? Because when we were kids and our parents had rules, the only reason that they made those rules was to keep us from having any fun, right? We know that was true as kids. As a matter of fact, I used to think, how late do my parents stay up at night after I go to bed? Remember wondering this? Like, what happens in your house after you go to bed? And I was sure that the only thing that they did was they stayed up to make rules because they were determined to keep me from having any fun. But then you become a parent and your perspective changes. And you recognize that you create rules to keep your kids safe. You create rules so that your kids have a better life. And in many ways, this is the perspective that the nation of Israel had with commandments or with rules, because God's relationship with Israel was very different than any other nation had ever had with their gods. The gods of the other nations had always been gods who were angry, gods who were against them, gods who were opposed to them, gods who couldn't wait to punish them and catch them doing something wrong. And then God came along and he rescued Israel from slavery. And he said, I am a God that is for you. And I'm a God that is going to do things on your behalf. And he parted the Red Sea and he saved the nation of Israel. And they realized that our God is different. Our God is for us. And so they began to see commandments as ways that they could improve their relationship with God. It wasn't a rule to keep them from having fun. It was a path to success. It was the key that unlocked all of the good things in their life. And so now Jesus is going to be explaining what is the great commandment? What's the most important key that will unlock greatness in our lives? And here was Jesus' answer. He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." This is the great and first commandment. So we're going to talk about this one today because this is the great and first commandment. But Jesus gave a second one that is like it. And we'll talk about that next week. But the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depends all the law and the prophets. In other words, everything hangs on these two. You want better relationships? Look to these two things. Everything else hangs on this. You want success in your career? Look to these two. Everything else hangs on these two. You want to finally have your financial house in order? Look to these two. Pursue these two things, and everything else will fall into place. These are the greatest commands. And they really just boil down to love God and love people. It's that simple. Matter of fact, when my kids were little, we had little cards that we had printed up for them, and they carried them with them, and they just said, love God, love people. That was it. That was our mission statement as a family. We said that is why our family is here on this earth. Love God, love people. That's why this church exists. Love God, love people. If we can do this individually, it will change our homes, it will change our workplace, it will change our schools. If we can do this together as a community, if all the people in this room decide that we're going to go out of here today and in 2020 we're going to love God and we're going to love people, it will change this community. People in this community will be saying, I don't know much about that Access Church, but I know that the people who go there love well. They love people, they love God, they love well, because they're pursuing these two things as if everything else hangs off of these two commandments. And let me tell you, greatness is not something you're born to. Greatness is not something that happens to you. Greatness doesn't choose you. You choose greatness. That's what Jesus is saying in this, that you can do great things. You can be great. Not because you were born with a special skill or a special talent or an ability that nobody else has, but because you choose to do something that very few other people are choosing to do. That is Jesus' definition of greatness. And that is the greatness that you can achieve this year. Now, Jesus wasn't speaking just kind of at random here. He didn't answer this question off the cuff. This answer didn't come to him just off the top of his head. Jesus was actually quoting Moses. And his audience would have known this. They were all Jewish people. They'd all grown up going to the temple. They'd all grown up going to synagogue. They would have known exactly what Jesus was saying when he was quoting what the Jewish people still today refer to as the Shema. The Shema is one of the most important things in all of Jewish literature. It is still used 3,500 years later. It's when Moses spoke to the nation of Israel before they went into the promised land. Before they went into this land that God had given them, Moses said, hey, we need to revisit some things, and we're going to start with this most important thing. So here's the way that Moses said it. He said, "Hear, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one." He is one God. Now that made him very different from all the other nations who had multiple gods that they had to appease for multiple reasons. But it also meant that our God, the Godhead, the Trinity, is one. There is unity in our God. There's unity in relationship and there's unity in purpose. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. Now, this was a bit of a game changer. No one prior to Israel had thought of having a relationship with God that was based on love, based on fear, based on obedience, based on sacrifice, based on appeasement. There were lots of other ways to form a relationship with a God and have that God not take his anger out on you. But the idea of a God who was love, a God who desired to love, was kind of a brand new thing. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, he is one. Love the Lord your God. Love, develop a relationship with God that is built on the fact that God is for you, that God has designed you to be great, that God wants great things for you. Love the Lord your God with what? With what? With everything. Love God with everything. All your heart and all your soul and all your might. All of it. Not most of it, not some of it, not 99% of it. All of it. All of what's inside of you and all that you have. All that's been given to you and all that you possess. The Jewish literature, the Talmud, taught that all your might meant with all of your financial resources. In other words, everything you have, everything that you are, all the people you love, everything. I am going to love the Lord my God with everything. Now, that is a whole new kind of relationship that people had never been introduced before. To have that kind of a relationship with God, to think of God as a heavenly Father who was for you, that you would have a love relationship with. And then Moses went on to say this, and these words that I command you, these words that we just talked about, these words that I command you today shall be on your heart, not in your mind, not written down, tucked away in a drawer somewhere, but they shall be on your heart. You should be thinking about this constantly. This should be a daily pursuit for you. And this is very important, you shall teach them diligently. The New International Version says you should impress them on your children. Well, where? Impress them on your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way. When you sit in your house, when you walk by the way. Their lives were very similar to ours, a little bit different. Maybe if we wrote this today, we'd say it was you sit in your house and when you're riding around in the minivan. You know, they didn't have minivans back then, but you say when you're like rolling in your swagger wagon, whatever you moms like to say. But when you're at home and when you're out and about. Doesn't matter where you are, you should be impressing upon your children. To impress upon them means that they're catching it from you. It's not just something that you're telling them as much as it's something that they're noticing about you. They're picking up from you, that they are learning from you to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might, wherever you go. In other words, what's really interesting about this is it's not at church, it's not at temple, it's not at tabernacle, it's not in synagogue. It is wherever you are. It's when you're out and about. In other words, did you know this? There's no youth pastor anywhere in the Bible. There's no children's pastor anywhere in the Bible. Because what is in the Bible are parents. God has given children parents to be their primary spiritual caregivers. God has given you the role and the responsibility as the primary spiritual caregiver in your home. And that's a daunting responsibility. I know that's a big one. I feel that. I grew up in a home where my mom was a believer and she pursued a relationship with God, but my dad did not. He almost never went to church with us, and he didn't have a relationship with God. And so when I had my own kids, when Stephanie and I, men, we don't, rephrase that. When we had our kids, right? Men don't ever talk about your kids. They're our kids. When we had our children, I didn't have a role model. I didn't have an example. I didn't know what it looked like for me to teach my kids spiritual things. I didn't know what it looked like to be a spiritual caregiver in my home. I needed some help, and I am so grateful that this church came alongside Stephanie and I and partnered with us to help us lead our children well. But that's what the church is. The church partners with us because we're the ones that are sitting at home with them. We're the ones that are in the minivan with them. We're the ones that are with them all day and all night. And that's the next part of this. He says, when you lie down and when you rise. So the first two, we're talking about location. The next two are talking about time of day. In other words, wherever you are, whenever you are. That is when you impress upon your children to love the Lord their God with all their heart and all their soul and all their might. Whenever, wherever. But it's on you. It's when you are out and about. And let me tell you, that's a daunting thing. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what that looked like. But this church came alongside Stephanie and I and partnered with us and said, we're going to give you some really helpful, really practical tools. And it's one of the things that I love most about this church. If your children are in Wombaland right now, you're going to go home today with a placemat. And that placemat is going to help you know exactly what is being taught to your preschool kid this week and the rest of the month. Because we keep one big idea or one virtue or one bottom line for the entire month. And we don't do that because kids need a whole month to learn virtue. Do you know why we do that? Because you need a whole month to learn the virtue. And I know this because I was that young dad. And I needed a month to go, oh yeah, okay, this month in Upstreet, they're talking about honesty. And so when I was with my kids in the morning or at night, I'm with them before they go out the door to catch the school bus, or I'm with them in their room praying with them at night, I'm able to go, oh yeah, honesty. And so I can say to them, hey, how have you really been wrestling with learning honesty this week? Have you ever been in a situation where you've been tempted to tell a lie, where you've been tempted to be dishonest? Remember how in Upstreet we're talking about honesty? This church came alongside and partnered with us and gave us the tools that we needed. Much in the same way that when our kids were young, we signed them up for swim team. Now, we had never been on swim team, neither Stephanie and I. We had no idea. But we thought this would be a great thing for our kids. We thought it'd be a great skill for them to learn. It'd be a great sport for them to be a part of. It was a cool thing that was going on in our neighborhood. And we wanted them to learn how to swim. And the reality is, if it was up to me to teach my kids how to swim, I mean, I can swim, but I swim to stay alive. That's the only reason I swim. You know, the whole idea of swimming for speed and swimming for competition, that was a whole new thing. And so for my kids to learn the backstroke and the breaststroke and the butterfly from swimmers, I needed coaches to come alongside and partner with me. and teach my kids some really helpful skill sets that they would use as they became better and better swimmers. Some of you guys do the same thing with soccer or football or other sports that you've decided, you know what, this is something we want to get our kids engaged in. Maybe you've decided to do it with dance or who knows what, gymnastics, right? But there's something that you've said, hey, we're going to partner with another organization, and this organization is going to help us as parents because I'm not a coach. I don't know how to teach my kids these things, but there's somebody out there that knows how to help our family and partner with our family to do this. And you know, just like I had to get up every weekday during the summer when my kids could have slept in, I had to get them out of bed and get them to pool early in the morning for swim practice. You've got to get your kids to practice because they're not going to learn soccer. They're not going to learn ballet. They're not going to learn gymnastics if you don't actually get them to practice. Showing up for practice, it turns out, is a really important part to developing the tools, the skill set that is going to last them as they continue to improve at this particular activity. The same exact thing takes place here at church. Showing up for practice matters. One of the best things that you can do to lead your family in the coming year is to simply continue to do what you've done today. Show up. Bring your kids, get them engaged in these environments. Let them connect with their small group leader and the other kids that are in their small group and let them learn to apply these skill sets in their life. Because you know what? We first signed up for swim team, 12, 13 years ago. My kids swam for 9 years. None of my kids swim anymore. It's fine, it was great. It worked really well for us during that season of life. But in 20 years, when one of my kids is struggling to keep their marriage together, nothing they learned at swim team is going to help them. In 30 years, when your kids are raising your grandchildren, and you'll have some opinions about that, nothing that they learned at soccer is going to help them. Nothing they learned in ballet is going to help them. It's going to be the skills and the tools that this church partnered together with you to help your children develop a lifetime of learning what it looks like to love the Lord their God with all their heart and all their soul and all of their strength. The single most important question that you can ask for 2020 has nothing to do with your goals for work or your goals for losing weight or your goals for financial fitness, or anything else. The most important question that you can ask for 2020 is this: what will it mean to lead your family to spiritual greatness in 2020? What will it look like to lead your family to spiritual greatness in 2020? And I want you to know that we are here to help. So you need to have a plan. You need to figure out, when and where am I going to do this? What's it going to look like? How am I going to develop some new habits? How am I going to develop some new patterns in our family? Maybe for you, this is really difficult because you don't even feel comfortable praying out loud with your spouse. And like many of my friends who go to this church, you weren't raised praying out loud. You don't know how to pray out loud. You don't know how to share your spiritual journey with someone else. And I just want to encourage you, there is no better time to start than now. I know, it feels awkward. You're going to gather your kids together at the end of the day, or maybe you're going to go into their rooms individually and you're going to say, hey, how was your day? What's on your heart? Anybody hurt your feelings today? Well, what are your hopes for this week or this weekend? Or what's ahead for you? And you can have some time with your kids and you can say, hey, can I pray with you and can I pray for you? And I know you're thinking that's going to be awkward, that's going to be uncomfortable, I don't know what to say, it's going to be weird. You're right. It will be all of those things, just like anything is when you first start. When I first went to the gym, I didn't know how some of that equipment worked. It was awkward. I was like, oh, you're supposed to sit the other way on that. Now it makes more sense, you know? That's true. You figure it out though, right? You start something new, you tackle something new, and you figure it out. And here's something that I believe with all my heart. When you tackle this, God will help you. He will be there with you. He will be there through the awkwardness. He will be there when it's uncomfortable, and God will partner with you. You sit down with your kids, you sit down with your spouse, and you start to pray together. Start to invest some time, but ask the question, when and where? How are we going to develop some new habits and some new patterns in our family? What are we going to do to lead our family spiritually in 2020? Now, some of us are like BHAG people, right? Big, hairy, audacious goal. We want to set a big goal out here. But I've become convinced as I've tried to be better and better with setting and keeping goals in my life, that it's not the big goals that really move the needle in my life. What really moves the needle in my life are the little habits. It's the steps that I take on a consistent basis that maybe don't seem like big steps all on their own, but eventually they will get me to my destination. And so, learning from our experience getting back from Fort Myers in the Suburban, why don't we all start with 12 minutes a day, okay? Just seems like a good number. It worked for us to get back here from Fort Myers. Maybe it'll work for you as well. But start with 12 minutes a day and just say, what would it look like? What would it look like for me to spend 12 minutes a day investing in my family's spiritual future? What would it look like for me to invest 12 minutes a day to give them the skill set that they need for life, for the most important challenges that they will ever face in life? And what would it look like for me to come back here, just like you did today, again and again and again, to get refueled and to learn again, what does it look like for this church to partner with us and help us? But then at home, whenever, wherever, 12 minutes a day. Now, these are just a couple of things that they're not in the Bible, but just a couple of things that I've learned in my life, and these aren't mine, I've read them somewhere. But when you're trying to set a habit, just a couple of things to help you. First of all, you're gonna miss. You're gonna miss. It's okay, you're gonna miss. Never miss twice in a row. That's a huge step toward building a new habit. So if you're trying to build a new habit this year and you miss one, just say, that's okay, that was today, but I'm not going to miss 2 in a row. If you can make that a promise to yourself, you will find the new habit will come along before you know it. And here's the other thing. Maybe you've heard before that it takes 90 days to develop a new habit, and you wonder why that didn't work for you because you did it for 90 days and then the habit didn't stick. Here's why. The data is not 90 days. The data is actually 77 repetitions. And some people have just tried to simplify that by saying that it takes 90 days to create a new habit. The problem is if you do something 9 times in 90 days, you're not going to develop a new habit. You have to repeat something 77 times. That's what it takes to create a new habit in your life. It takes 77 repetitions. So start with 12 minutes a day. And say, you know what? We're going to take some steps as a family. We're never going to miss twice in a row. You know, if we missed praying together yesterday, we're going to pray together today. We missed going to church last week, we're definitely going to go this week. Never miss twice in a row. And do 77 repetitions and develop a new habit in your life. Look, the reality is that we're going to break down on this road in life. And sometimes it could be something simple, right? I still don't know what's wrong with my Suburban, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's probably like a $59 fuel pump. Just this one small part. And that's both good news and bad news. The good news of that is that all I have to do is replace a $59 part and my Suburban is as good as new. Even if it's got, a few miles on the odometer, it's ready to go, just like you and me. But it also means that if I neglect or miss just one small component in my vehicle, then I'm sitting on the side of the road and I'm not going anywhere. Don't neglect these little things in 2020, these habits, these patterns that can make all the difference. And ask yourself, what am I doing in 2020? What are we going to do in 2020 to lead our family spiritually? And maybe you're here today, you're not a parent. Maybe for you, the application for this is as a grandparent. Maybe for you today, the application for this is your neighbors or your friends or your coworkers or somebody else's kids. What does it look like for you with the people that are closest to you to invest in them in such a way that you are leading them to make 2020 the best year and the greatest year ever? Let's pray. God, thank you so much for these two great commandments and how much we can learn from them about our lives today. Thank you for giving us families. Thank you for giving us parents. Thank you for giving us this incredible dynamic where we both have the opportunity to learn and to teach, to follow and to lead, and together to learn what it means to trust that the God of the universe loves us, sees us, is for us, and has designed us for greatness. God, help us to be great by following your great commandments. We ask all this in your name. Amen.